Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Carvel Community Meeting. Today's date is January 24th, 2024. If you're watching this recording from home, we encourage you to come join us live. We meet every second and fourth Wednesday of the month at 8 a.m. Pacific time. It's a great opportunity for you to come and meet the maintainers, other people in the community. You can ask questions, give feedback on what the folks are working on. Or you can just sit and listen. There's no requirement to engage if that's not your thing either. So we would love to meet you. So feel free to come join us. For those that are on the call and you do have something you wish to discuss, just a reminder, you can put that down on the discussion topic section and we'll get to it towards the end of the meeting. If you are unable to join us live and still need to get in touch with us, there's lots of ways to find us. You can find us in Carvel channel in the Kubernetes Slack workspace. You can email us. You can find us in GitHub within any of our project repos, or you can find us in X. It hurts my soul every time I have to say that. At Carvel_dev. And if at any point you are interacting with us or any members of the community, we ask that you please read and abide by our code of conduct, which is linked throughout all of our repos. So if you're using any of the Carvel tools, we would love to know more information about how you're using these tools. We've created a pinned issue in our main Carvel repo, and we also have the similar pinned issue throughout all the other tools. So instead of saying, are you using Carvel, it might say, are you using YTT? Are you using kapp? But this one's more of a general approach. So if you're using any of the tools, we ask that you put a comment here in this pinned issue with providing these different details about your organization, your use cases with the Carvel tools, and optionally adding your logo so that we can include it in our adopters file. Providing these details helps the community learn how folks are using the tools and helps them in a way of knowing how they too can use the tools. And it also helps our maintainers understand how folks are using them and ways that they might not have been aware. So, it's one thing to work on the tools, but to also use them day in and day out, it's just kind of a different perspective, and it helps us. So please take the time to input that information. We'd really appreciate it. Okay, and anyone who's on the call, just make sure to put in your name and any organization that you are representing while on the call here in the attendees list. Moving on to announcements, we have several releases that happened over the course of this past week, whether they were minor or a little bit more than that. So I'm gonna kind of popcorn folks to give us a little bit more detail on each of these releases. So here we go, a YTT 0.47.0. Who's able to give just a little bit of color to this?
So there's not a lot going on, so I guess I can take a shot. So we have started signing all of our artifacts, and that change was put in by Prashant. So thanks to Prashant, and we just bumped the Go version. So that's about it.
Cool. And I believe we added this new installation and signature verification to all of our releases now.
Yeah, that's across the board.
And that was based on discussion we had in our last community meeting. So very cool to see that. All right, moving on to kapp 0.60. Got a few more changes here.
I can speak about those. So also lots of new contributors. We have, I'm not sure how to pronounce their name, but Hogi, Jignasa, and Prashant over here as well. So Hogi worked on a change to ensure that when we're using, there's an option in kapp to deploy folders as separate apps, and they made a PR ensuring that they're ordered when they're deployed. So there's a PR by Praveen which adds some profiling flags. This essentially helps us benchmark cap better these days because we have been working on the performance a lot. And I'm not sure what's been updated in the docs, but Prashant has been like helping us with a lot of helping us out with a lot of good first issues. So Jignyasa also worked on two issues: one handling delete failures on pods better, and also some rearranging of tests that we have had in our backlog for a bit. So thanks to all of the new folks. And so Praveen made a PR which optimizes how much memory we use while doing larger diffs by using another algorithm. So that's like a major change that went in this time. And Prashant once again has helped us out with signing artifacts for CAP as well. Yeah, that's about it.
Cool. Thank you so much. Any questions or comments on this release before we move on? Or the other release that we spoke about with YTT? All right. Image package. 0.40.0.
Yeah, I can go with this. So the first two, I think Joe has worked, so I'm not much sure. So I think it'll be better to explain these two works. But the last one is like the same what we have discussed in other tools, like signing the artifacts for pre-release and then updated the release notes with the installation and verification steps to be followed. And then the new changes has been done in describe command of image package. So earlier when we describe the image, we were not showing the layers of the images. Now we will be showing the digest of those layers of the images. That's it. Joe, do you want to explain the first two?
Yeah, I can do that. My God, I think it was forever ago that the last that I fixed the first one and the second one as well. But I'll give it a shot. So like basically, the first one is we had a request from some folks that they wanted to have some sort of like a session identifier for an execution of a command of image package. So like when you push multiple images, right, to a registry and you copy them to a registry, they wanted to have like a way to tie all these as like a single session. So that's what the first one is. So we created a new flag that we send on the through the HTTP headers that contains a random ID that can be used to track a single session for image package. Like every time that you do an image package copy, that will create that header called image package -session -id. The second one, I think there was like some sort of a bug where when you were trying to pipe, I think that was when you're trying to pipe the output of the describe command to something else, it was not writing everything. So there's like a little bit of a bug there on the logging system, and that was also fixed. So those are basically the two changes that are there.
Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing those details. Any questions or comments on image package release before we move on?
The best release of this year so far.
I don't know, some stiff competition, Joe. Okay, moving on to vendor. Oh,
Yeah. Yes, I'll explain this. So there again, first of all, thanks to Jebradil and I don't know the first person. I think with Trenton. I if I have wrong, please sorry. And other than that, again here again the same changes for the release, signing the artifacts and then updating the release with the installation and verification steps. Except that the one which is done by Somik is this simplifying the git ignore. So actually, I think we have started adding the binaries for Darwin ARM, which was not added in the git ignore. So that is being added by Somik. After that, there's a private key with or without extra cache. So this issue we have faced recently. This is like this is not a issue with the vendor. This is a issue with Git. So the when we generate a key, private key and public key with the keygen things. So if that private key always has a new line character at the end of the that key. If by mistake we removed or something, if change, that depends on the how we copy that private key and then pass to the vendor. So that is also depends. So if that new line get removed from that private key, then git start throwing the error. So that changes I have fixed. This bug was there, so I fixed that. So now either we pass the private key with or without the new line, vendor will accept and work perfectly. After that, there are changes with the zebra dill about the race condition. So this is like whenever we sync anything using the vendor, a vendor create a temp directory. So earlier it was creating the naming of those directory was not unique. It was like same name for every sync. So when we are doing the multiple sync, then it was creating the race condition because we are trying to use the same directory. So that fix has done by Zebradil. Now vendor will be creating a unique directory, the temp directory. Then refactoring of lazy sync is just like a normal refactoring is like if any code change which is not being used, just remove those, and updating some library use, those kind of changes has been done. If anything I've missed. No, yeah, I think yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you so much for going over that. Any questions or comments, feedback for this one? Okay. And last but not least, K-Build 0.39.0. Anyone can give some information on this one? As per
Okay,
view.
everybody's afraid of K-Build. Okay, I'll talk about it. We didn't do any much here, right? We just pumped some versions of Go. We we now like use change the imports to use the Carvel dev new vanity links that now we have, and also what we did, we added a signing for K-Build, so now we are signing everything. And there were like some changes on the runner that runs the tests. So that was like a pretty maintenance-y version of K-Build as well.
Cool. Thanks, Joel. All right, any questions or comments? Cool. We're skipping over the project roadmap updates on where we are with that until Renew is able to join us. So we'll just move on to backlog stuff. Give updates on what the team is currently working on. So with kapp-controller, we have a proposal hardening kapp-controller container security by setting the seccomp profile to runtime default. Is there a link that you can post here to share, or is it just?
Hi, yeah, I have added this item. There is no link as such. It is just that as part of standard Kubernetes best practices, we are going to harden our containers for kapp-controller and secretgen-controller, and over there for the security context, instead of by default seccomp profile, which is set to unknown, we'll start setting it to runtime default. The idea is that the containers are more secure by default, and also in case somebody is trying to install kapp-controller and secretgen-controller on a Kubernetes cluster which has pod security admissions setting set to enforce, it will get deployed over there without any issues.
Do you mind creating issues on secretgen and on kapp-controller with this, please?
I'll do that.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. It's just to give more on it, we are not using any sys commands within kapp-controller and secretgen, so we should be fine with setting it to runtime default.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yep. Thanks, Rod. Really appreciate that. Moving on to K control. Who can talk about this?
I'll do that. So the first point is something that's been in the backlog for a while. I think I talked about it last time, so I just thought I'd call out it's still on the radar. And so we have finally sort of settled down on how we consume K control downstream and have managed to prune most of the specific code that was upstream. So yeah, that's where we're at. So that's an item that's been closed out.
Cool. Any questions on that? All right, moving on to cap. Prioritize running a permissions check pre-deploy.
So that's me again. So this was some like a requested feature from the OLM folks, and so there seems to be some interest on this from someone who has previously contributed to the previous release. So I was hoping to like get in touch with them and move it along. Like I don't mind contributing myself, but it'll be nice if someone new also lends a hand. So this essentially just involves checking if cap has the permissions given the context to do what it will do before actually going ahead and deploying anything. So yeah.
Varsha, you have your hand raised.
Yep. Hi, thanks for working on this. Really appreciate it. Is there going to be like a proposal to implement this feature, or how are we going to move forward? Like, how can we keep an eye on the next steps related to this?
So like, I guess the implementation I was thinking about was like, it'll just like look at the GVKs and do subject access reviews. So I don't think it'll need a proposal, but I would say that maybe you should follow the issue. And if I do put up a PR or if Fergie puts up a PR, I'll drop a text on the channel.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks.
Has anyone heard from this person, Fergie, who said that they were interested?
I was hoping to hunt them on the Kubernetes Slack, but that's the best option we have.
Okay, maybe I can try to find them. All right, moving on. Ooh, all right, we're now in discussion topics section, with about 35 minutes left. Resource health monitoring, a proposal done by the OLM folks. Varsha, do you want to talk about this?
Sure, yeah. Yesterday I just put up a proposal based on the discussion we had in the previous meetings. So to give a very brief overview, this is to introduce the concept of health monitoring for individual bundled resources, which are being deployed through the app. So the idea is to dynamically add informers for each of the resource which the bundle creates, and then eventually reconcile and report the status depending on whether the resource is healthy or not. And the respective conditions to evaluate them are also mentioned in here. We did receive a few comments, so thanks a lot for taking a look at that. So I wanted to take this chance to discuss about some of the major questions which I have been seeing since morning. So one of there are three things which I could immediately see and segregate the discussion topics. So the first one is related to the performance and resource consumption. So this was like a valid point in terms of if we create watches for each of the resources which are being created by the bundle, even if it is by object, we will have an extensive amount of memory being consumed because of caching. And also we can expect reconciles continuously if any of the object is unhealthy. This second point, which I wanted to discuss, was about the inspect and the healthy condition, which we have in the app CR status right now. So inspect basically gives a superset of all the resources which are being installed, and also the condition on how many, also the condition of each of the resource. And healthy status, which we are trying to introduce, is basically telling if a particular resource is healthy or not. So I feel kind of inspect gives a superset of what we are trying to put it in healthy, except that inspect gives an API call. The process by which it gets the resources totally different, gets the condition is totally different than what we are going to do in the healthy condition, which is through informers. So the one thing I was skeptical about is at any instant of time, since probably I haven't looked into the code base, but probably if two different clients are used, there could be conflicting information being posted by both of the conditions. So probably do we need to make both of them exclusive mutually? Is that a viable solution? And the third one was regarding the probably the structure of the message, and we can definitely iterate on that more. There's no specific format which we have zeroed down to right now. But yeah, these are the three things which were of a major concern. So I'm just looking for feedback and thoughts and like discussion on these three things. For the first option, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say thank you, but go for it.
yeah.
So for the first, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I just thought like I'd summarize like my concerns real quick because there are like a lot of blocks of text, right? So I think you got most of it in place, and I was just thinking like is the problem really that we want to introduce a status, or do we just want to track more specific messages from certain resources? Like I'm just trying to get the high level overview, right? That's like a query I had. Like if we're always going to be at reconcile failed of the healthiest false, are we just trying to get like more information about certain resources?
So the idea is we necessarily need not have more information on why a resource has failed, but there could always be a scenario that after a reconcile, probably a particular deployment is not healthy or a particular custom resource is not healthy and things like that. In that case, for probably SREs who are trying to monitor the cluster, what they do right now is have another controller written on top of it, which basically watches each of the bundles and sees queries if all the resources are healthy or not. And in case if a particular resource is not healthy, they create alert saying that this resource in this bundle is not healthy. And that kind of additional effort can be reduced if the package manager, whether it's KApp or OLM, is able to surface the information just about the resource which is being unhealthy. Even if we have information on, say, a deployment is unhealthy, in which namespace, and a very short information on why it is so, we can look into what message or what kind of print we want, message we want to print, but that is the most useful thing which we could have. So it's not necessary just the reconcile failed. There could be any point where even after the reconcile is successful, a particular object can not be healthy.
And what we're looking for is like immediate reporting of this, and like we don't want to wait till the sync period reconciles again.
Yes, and one option was through informers. So basically that would reconcile every event in a dependent resource. So we could not have this condition and just have a continuous watch being set on individual resource and let the inspect command take care of it. But that kind of doesn't make sense on a bigger picture because we are basically setting up informer and sending an API request. So if we are anyway going to set up informers, we could as well have the status filled with whatever info we need. Regarding the resource consumption, what do you all think about probably having this as an optional feature to get started? And is re-triggering the reconciler if any of the resource is unhealthy a useful feature for kapp-controller users in general? Like, have there been any asks related to it?
We have had one ask where a user wants to treat a single resource in such a way where if that critical resource has failed, we reconcile immediately. However, like one thing I want to make sure is that, so we have this behavior where if a reconciliation fails once, we actually start a reconciliation again almost immediately. But if there are repeated failures, there's this back off behavior that happens. Like kapp-controller will slowly try and reconcile it less and less sooner. And I think if we are doing something like this, we should definitely retain that behavior. This would prevent cases where the queue gets clogged up or we are stuck just because of a couple of packages that are consistently failing. Like that was one of my main concerns with the reconciliation triggering bit, actually.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'm not sure I would have to revisit, but I think controller runtime does exponential back off in case of errors. So yeah.
What are we trying to achieve here? That's the part that I'm not 100% sure. Are we trying to get like some sort of a health monitoring tool, or are we trying to be proactive and try to fix whatever problem we have? Because like that's the part that I'm not 100% sure, and that I think it's kind of important to understand like the reconciliation bit of it. So what are we trying to, what is the problem that we're trying to solve here is just monitoring?
So the initial problem which we are trying to solve is, as you said, just monitoring, but monitoring resources continuously through informers would result in a continuous reconcile in the sense a trigger reconciling because of the dependent resources. So yeah, like it's trying to solve problem one, but eventually problem two is also getting solved because of the use of informers.
Yeah, like I I wrote that down, but like in some sense I do have some concerns here, especially for performance and consumption of kapp-controller, because kapp-controller can just be in a state where it's like constantly reconciling and just using all the CPU for the cluster because of this behavior. And I'm a little bit concerned of that because of that. Because like if we have kapp-controller controlling like two applications in a cluster, I don't think this is going to be a problem. But kapp-controller is actively being run on clusters with hundreds or even thousands of applications running, right? So having that kind of load plus being triggered every time that triggering reconciliations every time that there's like any kind of change that on health that might not be related to the need to recreate something might be like might be like too expensive, right? And like for example, if let's imagine that the pod dies, right?
Mm.
You have like a panic. Somebody wrote a code on a pod and the pod panics. Should we really reconcile again? Shouldn't like the deployment take care of that? You know, it's like, it kind of feels like that. One thing, like if we are going for some sort of like a more monitoring solution, I think that's good, right? Because it just can provide like more information and so on. If we're going to a state where we're going to actively try to solve any kind of problem that might exist, we might be trampling the application itself, right? Like we might be just recreating the deployments when there's no need for recreating deployments, or we might be in a state where somebody deleted a CRD that the package just uses, not creates, and it just starts failing everything, all the deployments when you try to deploy, and it just kapp-controller just keeps doing things, right? So like I'm a little bit concerned of like mashing the two together, even though I understand that in some sense it makes like, if we know there's a problem, can we just not fix it right away? Like that's like a pretty, looks like a pretty small breach to go. But I'm a little bit concerned about like this moving the kapp-controller into a situation where it's just constantly reconciling just because a pod died, and you can get like in this spiral of death place where if a pod dies because it's out of memory, and kapp-controller is going to recreate deployments for it just to try to fix it up, it's going to use more memory. So there's no memory for the pod, and you can just get into a spiral of death where everything is dying at the same time, right? So if what we're trying to do here is try to find a way on how can we show that an application that the resources installed by an AppCR are not healthy, it's one thing. If we want to go the next step and say like, but we want to try to fix it, I think we need to be very careful with how we're going to do that.
Okay. Yep, fair. How would it work if we tailor it in a way where we watch resources and use this just to solve the problem one? Basically, we just monitor and provide a list of unhealthy resources, and we don't trigger the reconcile. Probably, I don't know, filter out the events coming from the bundle resources through I don't know, through some form of metadata. And we just watch for any events on the dependent resources and just update the status and not re-trigger again.
So like, there's a thing that I'd like us to like think of this possibility where we can, there's nothing that is kind of forcing us to have a single controller do everything for a resource, right? We can come up into a world where we have like multiple controllers that can be responsible for different parts of a status, for example. And that could be something that, like, if the idea here is just that we want to monitor, maybe adding like a second controller to kapp-controller, or something like we can increase the API, the AppCR API, to contain more information. We would have to also increase the package install API, right? Because the information there to circle back to the package install. But we could like increase the API for AppCR, and then from there say, okay, there's like this second controller that is going to be responsible for reading the AppCR. Somehow, like we can talk about like how technically everything connects together and so on, but like theoretically, kapp-controller would be responsible for installing things, and there would be like a monitoring controller that would be responsible for monitoring the AppCRs and update the status on the AppCR itself, right? Like this is something that I'd like us to think like is this something that is possible? Like what it would look like if we did something like this. And maybe that could start creating us a pattern where we can increase, like based on a single API, we can have multiple components that work in some sort of like, or let's call it in harmony, to contribute to different parts of like of this API. And I think that's good. It's an interesting thinking exercise that can lead us to like the next steps. Like what happens if we want to do if you want to do creation of RBAC, right? If you want to do creation of RBAC, maybe that doesn't make sense on kapp-controller, but maybe there's a way where we can have like another controller, another component that can do that for us, right? Like we can start growing the ecosystem around what we call kapp-controller as this like monolith into something that's a little bit more modular, in that you can enable or you can add the controllers that you're interested in your particular use case. I think that would be something that I would love if somebody has a little bit of time to like explore and think about. And maybe this is a good place for us to think about that.
Yeah, fair. This is something we kind of explored in RuckPack, but we decided not to go ahead with this. And that's something which I just now realized will not apply to KApp, is we had the concept of provisioner in RuckPack, in the sense folks could create their own controllers, create their own provisioners. So we didn't have access to how the particular controller that deploys the resources is built. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, in KApp, if we have some way for us, for the KApp controller to expose the information on what resources are being created by a particular app CR, then basically what you said makes a lot of sense. Like have another component take care of status reporting and things like that.
So like right now, KApp
Mhm.
create some sort of like a caching config map that we can evolve into a way like, or we can just piggyback on that and see like what are the things that we're missing here that could be good. And like this is a good thing of like when you're creating the API and also the reference implementation, you can just add things that you need, right? Like, so that's something that we can look into and say like, okay, so in order for us to be able to do this to do this monitoring, we need this information. Where can we get it? How can we get it? How can we share it? And that's something that definitely we can talk about.
Okay, got it. Yeah, this is super helpful. I'll just go back and discuss more on this, think more about the implementation, and probably get back with more questions and discussions. But thanks a lot for sharing this info. This is helpful.
I think the one other thing that would be helpful, and I don't know if the proposal covers it because I haven't had a chance to look, but it would be very beneficial. We've talked about this previously in kapp-controller, is kind of the lack of Prometheus metrics exported. And having this data in this controller exposed as Prometheus metrics through an endpoint would be extremely beneficial, not just on the status. I've built a cube exporter that does stuff, but having at least the Prometheus metrics of it would also make creating alerts and things like that in environments much easier, rather than needing to parse out the status. So if building out a controller, that may be worth adding into the controller as well.
Yeah, the current proposal does not cover it, but yeah, that's definitely a possibility, because in other controllers which we have built, we kind of expose an endpoint with a service monitor, which is an optional feature, and then folks can create their own Prometheus instance and scrape metrics from it. So yeah, that's something which can be done, definitely, if that's something we want to add.
Okay, and Rohit said, it will be interesting to ensure the sync between two different controllers while updating status.
Oh, yeah,
sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, the thing which I wanted to say is basically if we decide to have multiple controllers to make sure there are no conflicts, and I think the general design is until we use server-side apply, is basically a particular part of the resource should not be updated by multiple controllers. So if there's this particular status field which is being handled by a separate status controller, then kapp-controller should not probably touch it. There are better ways to handle it, probably using SSA, but yeah, for the initial implementation, that's something that just came into my mind.
Sure. Yeah, I was just referring to that, like the monitoring controller is trying to update information that this resource is not healthy, and at the same time, kapp-controller is trying to reconcile it, and it has reconciled it as healthy. So we just don't want to give out the wrong information.
Yep.
We could change just it's like there's like a proposal, not a proposal, sorry. There was a PR that somebody started to add a server-side apply for kapp itself, right? But I think that in our case, we could just maybe go into a world where we can do server-side apply just on kapp-controller for the status itself, right? Or is there anything that's impeding us from doing that?
I didn't follow you.
So like we could change the way kapp-controller works to when it's writing the status to do SSA instead of just like bumping the full thing into to the status. And that way we could kind of have like that separation already.
Sure.
Theoretically, yes, but yeah, as you said, I haven't looked into the code base, or
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the project, but yeah, SSA would kind of solve a lot of problems related to the conflict errors.
Yeah, like I was just signing up because I know that we had somebody that tried to add SSA on kapp. It was quite like a big undertaking, but I think if it is just for status on kapp-controller itself, maybe it's not like such a big undertaking, and maybe it's something that could like pave us some road for the future, or like on this architecture where you can have like multiple components contributing for like status and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think
something to explore.
Using the informers is a better design as compared to setting up a watch on individual resource, because each watch will be a live connection and on an individual resource, and that will overload the Kubernetes API server. So should definitely be going via the informer approach.
If we are creating another controller, or either ways, like whether it's in kapp or whether it's another controller, agreed that informers kind of introduce the concept of caching. They cache by the recent changes, enable caching by object, and we have a watch exposed on the API server. But the other option is basically querying the API server every time. Instead of pulling in the updates by having a watch, we basically query and at a particular interval see the status and update it, which I think will load the API server more. So in terms of that, kind of caching and watching it and creating informers for them is a better approach.
Yeah, so what I'm coming is so one is if you look into the broader perspective, where there are thousands of FCRs running. Now by default, the sync period is set to 10 minutes. So by every 10 minutes, kapp-controller will fire multiple API calls as part of the regular reconciliation loop it is having, right? And that makes a good number of API calls on the API server. And then on top of that, if we have to be careful on if we really want HTTP2 connections, how many HTTP2 connections we want to have it open. But I think informers will just use the events, so it should be fine.
Yeah, informers basically create an open connection, and if there is any event occurs on a particular resource, that event is processed, and then the latest resource version is cached. So yeah, the question of having continuous reconciles and having performance and uh, memory consumption is definitely a fair point, which is why I agree with what Java had mentioned, like instead of loading the kapp-controller, probably create another controller. We would eventually be creating the same number of watches, but that would be an optional feature which a user can opt for, depending on their particular environment. So if folks are ready to have a controller and they have a use case of monitoring the resources, then definitely they could. If not, it's a completely optional feature in general.
Yeah.
So to tie this up, do you think, Varsha, you can take a look at like this approach of creating like another controller that will contribute on status to see like how that would work, and so we can have a discussion on the on this proposal for that?
Yeah, sure. That sounds good. I can take a look at this and probably get back with more questions and topics of discussion for the next meeting.
Cool. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Varsha, for putting this together and all of your efforts here, and then everyone for providing their feedback. Good discussion here. I'm sure we will continue talking about it in our next meeting with what Varsha comes up with. We have 5 minutes left. I wanted Renu to kind of go over what the status is of each of these items on the roadmap was. Renu, do you think 5 minutes is enough time just to give some brief status updates there?
Sure. I can go with the first one, release package repository as star. I think Ashish is here. It's still in code review state. Can request Somik and Joao to push this along. Let's see if we can close this out soon. And then once the image package changes are done, then we'll have to add these changes to KCTRL2. So that part is also pending. And we'd love to see more contributions from Ashish on that part too. Changes to KCTRL to include the image package changes. Next one is signature and salsa attestation for all Carvel artifacts. So these are actually in progress. Quite a few tools. We have already done some PRs to those. Somik, do you want to add which all tools already have this?
So the CLIs that we have released in the past week, they all have the new installation and verification section, and they're all signed. Most of them. Yeah, most of them are definitely signed. I think we are still thinking about how we want to take it forward with some of the controllers, but all of the new releases are signed and they have instructions as to how folks can verify it.
Only the controllers are pending. Let's see what we need to do on those. Okay. Next one is provide more information about layers for each image. This one is it
This one is
merged?
Yeah,
This one is done, right?
it was
Yeah,
merged and it was released already. So that one we already finished.
Option to skip SSL. For Git, this one was done in vendor, and we want to ensure that this is also available through kapp-controller. We are in the testing phase for this. Once it's tested completely, we will merge it and close it out. And I'm waiting for the proposal to make kapp-controller extensible from Joao. Whenever you
Yeah,
have
that's going to be hard. Yeah, so like I think like this is going to be, it's going to take a little bit of time for us to get there, because there are like other things that are in our priorities in Broadcom right now that might take precedence on top of this. But I do think that if we get to an interesting design with the work that Varsha is proposing, maybe we can have like a first step there that could help us better understand like what could it look like for us to have a little bit of more extensibility on kapp-controller side. So I think that's that. And the just like something like another thing that we've been working on and that eventually might come into kapp-controller in somewhat the near future is a proposal to add some dependency management features on kapp-controller itself. We don't know like when. We've been thinking a little bit about that, just to let folks know. We have some ideas. Is it going to be a full-fledged dependency management? Not in the beginning. We'll try to get a little bit more information the next couple of weeks. Maybe a proposal that was going to kickstart this process for us. Just so y'all know. And when we have the proposal, we'll add this to our project roadmap.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. If there's nothing else pressing, we can go ahead and end. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to bring up or share real quick? Okay. And I've completely lost. There you are. All right. Thanks everyone for joining this week's edition of the Carvel community meeting. Appreciate everyone's efforts here and the discussion and feedback. Thank you all for joining, and hopefully to see you all again in our next meeting, which is, we meet every second and fourth Wednesday of the month at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and hopefully we get to see some new faces then. All right, thanks, and have a good rest of your evening or day, wherever you are.
Thank you. Bye-bye.